trying to find, the why and the how. Obviously, the what is pretty clear. I mean, everybody wants to do things and apply AI to this and this and this business problem.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about why and how?
Yeah,
or?
I think the why first is really to realize that AI is a revolution. I mean, it's not just a hype. Okay, you might have the impression it's a hype, but actually, if you look at the facts, there are really good reasons why we speak so much about AI in 2024. There are technical reasons. To be clear, I mean, the models that we have been building, the models which are powering tools like ChatGPT, for example, those models, they really behave very well. I mean, and maybe a little bit unexpectedly well in some sense. And if 2020, for example, you would have asked me what is the level of performance I could expect from one of those models in terms of, I don't know, passing a university exam, I would have said we are still very far from that. And when ChatGPT, the first version came around late 2022, and when we had the possibility to start playing with those models also a little bit before that, we really started to understand that there is something quite deep in terms of the performance of those models. And I think that even if most experts, they won't admit it, I think many experts were essentially surprised by how performance those models were actually.
Jeff Bezos said we did not really invent AI. We are discovering it.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we don't understand it fully yet, right? So we know how we can build those algorithms. We know how we can train them on huge amounts of data. But what we don't know exactly is how they learn, and how can we re-explain how good they are at learning relatively complex things. It's not even clear that they're actually learning anything. I mean, it's not clear that those systems are really intelligent. I mean, maybe they're extremely good at faking intelligence. But in some sense, I mean, from a purely pragmatic point of view, if you're extremely good at faking intelligence, it's still quite useful from a business perspective.
There's a thin line between being intelligent and faking intelligence, right?
So I would say that that's really the first reason why I think it's not just a hype. It's really this idea that those models are actually very performant and maybe a little bit more performant than we initially thought. That's one thing. The other thing, it's a little bit more subtle, I would say, and maybe we don't discuss so much in the media about it, is the notion of foundation models. But those foundation models are really decoupling the training part of the algorithm from the actual application of the algorithm to a certain business issue or business problem we are trying to solve. And the fact you can decouple means that essentially we are moving from an economy based on data to an economy which is almost an economy based on models. Because those models, if you want, they are kind of a way to compress the data. Okay, but just retaining anything which is useful. But you also have open source models that you can take, download, and apply to your specific situation.
And do you use more OpenAI or open source models, or does it?
We use everything which is relevant, and we obviously do use OpenAI models like GPT-4, for example, the latest model by OpenAI, because it's very powerful. But at the same time, it's proprietary, which means that in terms of sovereignty, in terms of how much do you control what's in there and what gets out, it's limited, right? And we actually have better alternatives, which are not more performant, which are not better in terms of raw performance, I would call, but which actually give you more, that can give you more, guarantees when it comes to sovereignty.
But then what I like also, because of course everybody talks about China, that is quite far in using AI, and also America, and Europe is lagging a little bit. That's what they say.
A bit,
but I also think that in Europe we are quite far at legal tech. So the ethics about it.
Ethics, if you look at the definition of what ethics is, right? Because everybody is talking about ethics, but if you open a dictionary and you look at what the definition of ethics is essentially the making values concrete in operations, if you want, right? So you have to start with the values, okay? And I think that's something which is very strong in Europe, is that we do share a common base of values, right? and a very strong one.
Yeah.
And if you agree on this common, set of values, I think that we can find unique ways of implementing those values into concrete solutions, which are actually not going to respect those values by constraint, but actually going to implement those values by design.
Yeah.
And I think, again, the word design, right? And I think that's really where we can make a big difference. This notion of AI agents is really interesting in legal tech, but in many other sectors. Yeah. The idea is always the same. You have some complex task to achieve. Yeah. And to achieve this complex task, you have to actually divide the complex task into subtasks, which require actions, right? Yeah. And what actually you can do is to have a team of AI agents at your disposal and give, the high-level complex task to this team to perform, and you will have a first step where the complex task is divided automatically into subtasks, and then each agent is going to take one subtask and trying to do it, right? And they are going to act a little bit independently, and then they are going to put together all the results of their actions to actually achieve the complex task. Yeah. So that's a new way of thinking about how to achieve complex processes.
But this actually can be used, this kind of solution can be used on any kind of service-oriented organization. So it really changes organization structure, so it's also part of organization design.
Indeed.
Is it then also a little bit like humans? Like some people are very intelligent or very smart in math, and other ones are very smart in social connections, and other ones are more artistic?
Yeah. So those very large models are trying to be generalist.
Yeah, they can do anything.
Exactly. GPT-4, they can write poetry, explain general relativity, name it, right? But they're extremely large, which means also they need relatively, quite a lot of energy to be executed, right? What we could imagine is to have smaller models, which are actually fine-tuned or better trained on data which are sector-specific, like healthcare or math, as you said, or poetry, right? Yeah. But you could have smaller models which are a little bit more focused, and since they are smaller, they might be slightly more efficient in that particular field. Okay, but since they are smaller, they could also be more energy efficient, which means that they could be a little bit cheaper to execute and have less of environmental impact.
Only investigating what's new in order to find out what's new, and use a generic model on simple problems will just create more waste, or more energy waste, more talent waste even.
Yes. And aligning with that, there is also the notion of what we call collaborative intelligence instead of monolithic intelligence. Yeah. So with the appearance of models like ChatGPT or GPT models, we might get the impression that there will be one model to rule them all. Yeah. Right. So the one model will actually solve all my business issues. That we just use GPT-4 to whatever business question we have.
Whatever you use, it's like the Swiss Army knife used for anything.
And I don't think it will work. Okay. It won't work because if you look at the history of artificial intelligence, but also the history of developing human intelligence, what we have seen is that if you need to achieve long-lasting impact, it's much more about collaboration than monolithic intelligence, right? It's very rarely in the history of humanity that we achieved something great just, with one person, for example. It's very often because we have collaboration between people, implicit or explicit, that we actually succeed in achieving big results. Yeah. And I think it will be the same with AI. We really believe that it's much more relevant to try to build networks of what we call agents, AI agents, which are essentially small intelligent systems which have some action means and some communication means to interact one with each other to actually achieve very complex purposes.
How does it become practical? What do you do in everyday projects? How do you help the people, the companies?
Take, for example, a kind of application that we call chat with your own data, right? Yeah. You are a company and you have gathered so much data, documentation, reports, whatever kind of data that you have been assembling in some content management system, software, whatever. And access to this data is very often very difficult, right? Yeah. If you have a new employee coming in and you say, well, try to find on this, intranet kind of things, the information, we all know that
it's a big onboarding protocol and nobody reads it.
Exactly, nobody reads it. Because ultimately you don't want to read the report, or you don't want to read the documentation.
You just want to know things.
You want to know things. You want to know the answer to your question, right? You are facing a challenge, and you would like to know the answer on how to go through this challenge. And actually, Gen AI and text-based AI can really help with that. Essentially, we can. There are systems which called retrieval augmented generation. It's a bit of a technical term. RAGs. The acronym is RAG, and those systems, they help you actually, gathering the data all around, putting the data into a system which essentially allows you to interact with your own data, the data of your company. Those agents are going to interact one with each other in natural language. So you, as a human, you can essentially jump in the system and understand what's going on, right? So I think that it's really a big added value. And by the way, that's why we believe that design is so relevant, because ultimately it's not about just a chatbot that does everything. It's about designing complex systems of interaction, of actions, of workflows, and understanding how humans can actually interact with those very complex systems. So there are huge design problems to be solved, or opportunities. So how do you see AI fitting in the history of TD?
We started as an industrial design agency. Then we became known for our logos and house styles and font types. But then, of course, Total Design also had the first computer in an agency in Holland. It was a computer that could fill up a room and that needed operators, but we were most progressive in that. We also were testing out how font size and font types would work on screens. And that was new at the time because it was 1967 actually. So we always tried to pick up new trends and to see where it could help people and where it could steer companies, clients, but even the society. AI actually is a transformative technology that will change a lot, and that can help you actually become the best version of yourself as a person, but also as a company. Everybody is now interested in AI, and not everybody knows how to deal with that. And of course, there's a lack of knowledge, and we can of course add that, and we can train, we can give trainings or workshops, or we can help people out. But that's of course the top-down approach. That's when you start with a vision and a strategy and why you want to use AI or for what purpose. But what I also notice is that these top-down approaches do not land always. And so you can also do a bottom-up approach. There are people enthusiastic about using AI or using tools and experimenting. And that creates new knowledge. That also makes the organization learn a little bit more, and it doesn't depend on the director. How do you see that balance? Because I think the balance is really important, right?
Something I actually learned working with you on those problems is that it's actually, you should find a balance between the two approaches. I don't think that one approach can really dominate the other one. I don't think that one will be successful and the other one will fail. I think you have to find a balance. The top-down one is interesting because it can help, understanding the big picture. How AI is going to affect my business at the highest level. I mean, how it will change my strategy. How could it change even my purpose, maybe. But at the same time, if you keep it too high level, it's difficult to achieve impact, especially in the short term, right? And it can require huge amount of investments without getting a fast return on it. So balancing this with a more bottom-up approach, which is more rooted into the actual, business problems people are facing, is actually a good strategy, I think.
So it's like managing all these three lines: the strategic, the technical, and the operational, and then balancing that out, and that creates a progress, actually.
I think at the root of it, there is a human factor. I mean, the fact that both of us as companies, but also the Yuma Group, are really trying to understand and focus on the human factor of digital transformation.
How does it help us?
How does it help us? Yeah. And not only how can we add a layer of humanity or whatever on a process. No, it's really trying to understand at the core what we want is not to develop an AI system which is better than a human system.
It's not AI for AI purposes.
It's not AI for AI. It's not AI better than human. No. What it is about is how can we have AI and human to build systems which are intrinsically better than AI alone.
Yeah.
Right? So it's one step further. Yeah.
And is this like techno-optimism or is this a different thing?
No, I don't think it is. If you really look at the type of applications you are trying to build, we very quickly we understand that human factor is really the deciding factor. You have to see this not as a problem, but as a solution, and to use the human factor to really build better systems. But to go to the next level and really to go into production, from this POC to proof of concept to production, the thing is that it really requires a lot of skills, a lot of skills. Yeah. And honestly, you don't typically find all those skills into one company. Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why it makes so much sense for us to work together, and with other companies of the Yuma Group, is because we are able to bring all those skills which range from strategical design, thinking, up to actually running operations, managed services and things like that. And everything that goes in between, from design to actually building softwares, building data pipelines, I mean, anything you need. And really to achieve the entire picture, to really make the entire picture real, I think it takes a huge amount of skills that most AI service players don't really have in-house.
What is the start? How does it work?
Oh, there are many possible starting points. I mean, we can start with training, awareness. We can start with workshop to start identifying where AI in the organization could help. Yeah. We can then build roadmaps, for example. I mean, very concrete action plans on what we should do first, where should we invest limited resources, right, to start with. And then there is so many things we can do at the implementation level, right?
Yeah, we can build anything.
We can build
just about.
I think it's fair to say, nowadays we can build anything. We have all the skills between companies like TD and B12 and in the Yuma Group. We can build any AI application you can think of, which is, today technically feasible. Obviously, I have my point of view as a technical person, but where do you see AI, growing from a designer's perspective?
It's a whole domain that opened up and can change everything. And when it can change everything, you need to have some kind of idea what you want to change and where you want to be. And that all is about design, right?
Indeed.
So how can AI and design create new, bold, new worlds, but also new, simple solutions? And that was the same actually in 1996 when the web was a big thing, of course. We didn't really know what the next thing would be. And what do you think? What do you think that the future will be?
We really have to take back control in some sense. AI will be what we want it to be. I think that's a very important statement. So I think that what will happen is that we will move towards more design of systems. So we will start to think, okay, ultimately, what are we trying to achieve as a task? And what is, the purpose of organizations? I mean, starting from those notions and trying to see how we can build AI systems, not only one model, not only one applications, but systems of agents, maybe, interacting one with each other to actually achieve a global purpose. If you look at the term itself, artificial intelligence, it was coined in 1956 at a well-known conference called the Dartmouth Conference. And people really thought, okay, what is really the distinction between a human and a computer, right?
Yeah.
If you want to achieve tasks, what makes us distinctive, and could computers start copy what makes us distinctive as human, right? Yeah. It's the nice thing about artificial intelligence is that you always define it a little bit in the mirror of humans, right?
Yeah.
And the funny part is that actually very often people define intelligence as things that machine cannot do.
Yeah.
If you look at the definition of intelligence in the 19th century, adding two very large numbers, for example, was a sign of intelligence. Yeah. Nowadays, nobody would claim that because we know that a computer can do that, right?
Yeah.
Using language was a sign of intelligence.
Being creative.
Being creative, right?
Yeah.
And when you see machines are actually moving in this direction, then people start to redefine the notion of intelligence to say that, you know, actually the human intelligence is essentially what artificial intelligence is not, right? So it's kind of a mirror game between. So yeah, that's the beginning of the field, 1956. And from there you essentially had two directions. One that we could call reductionist kind of direction. It was understood in the 80s and the 90s that this was going nowhere, essentially. So we went more into the field of machine learning, where the idea is more to build algorithms that can learn by mimicking things like neural networks, for example, which are essentially very flexible structure that can learn by the example.
So actually what you're saying is AI helps us, it's actually a way of understanding ourselves?
Oh yeah, it is. Humans still tend to perceive AI systems either as a tool, as a hammer, right? I mean, and a hammer, you can use it as a tool, but it has no identity, right? Or as a god. And God is something that you fear, essentially. I mean, that's something which is beyond your control. And there might be something in between, right? I mean, something which is neither a hammer, neither a god, and that actually is something which is essentially at the same level as us, that we can respect, that should respect us, by the way, also, and that we can interact constructively with.
And on that area, it's also partly looking at yourself, or improving yourself, or helping yourself, and also partly looking at somebody else and conversing with it, letting it help you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting.
It's a very important theme of science fiction, right? And I to be frank, I have to make a confession, right? I mean, since a few years, I barely read, generalist books about AI. I mean, obviously I read very technical books about AI, but most of my time, my free time, I spend reading science fiction. Yeah. Because I find a lot of inspiration in science fiction to try to see what could be the possible future. Yeah. Right?
It's interesting, by the way, even science fiction changes because science fiction in the 50s was all about robots.
Yes.
Being metal and mechanical. And nowadays, science fiction is also about psychedelica. It's also about in the mind or outside the mind. It started, of course, with the Matrix, which is actually also about is reality real? Yep. So AI actually also changes the futurism, and that's where new worlds are born, right?
Indeed.
All right, cool. Okay. Let's write a book.
Yes, we should do that.